How's it going, guys? Welcome to the Zain Effect. Today I have Ed Mylett, who's been a mentor to me, who's been a friend. He's been someone that's really changed my life. I started watching Ed's content a few years ago, and it's just been remarkable the way he's really able to connect with people. And I've followed a lot of mentors, a lot of different people, but with Ed, what really relates to me is just one, where he comes from, how his upbringing was, all the tough times that he's kind of been through, and what he's really turned into today. And one of the really interesting things about Ed is he really cares about connecting with people. So it's been someone that's absolutely changed my life. And I just want to say I appreciate you hopping on, Ed, and I'm super excited for this interview, man.
Hey, Zane, it's great to be with you. And, I'm most grateful for our new friendship that we've been building here for the last couple months. And I think it'll be one that'll last the rest of our lives. So it's an honor to be with you and your audience.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. So I want to jump in with where you grew up. If you could just talk a little bit about where you grew up. It's a really special place to me as well. So I'd love to hear where you grew up, kind of what your upbringing was like, and kind of what environment you come from.
Well, I was born in Weymouth, Massachusetts. So I kind of split my upbringing between there and California because we moved. I don't know what age I was, but I split between those two places. But I'm a Boston boy, and I grew up in I guess you would probably call slightly lower middle class to middle class family. My family's a working family. The people in my family work really hard. They're very family oriented. Like many people from New England, it's not about what car you drive or how much money you have, but what kind of a person you are. And so I come from a good family, although I think I know you know this, dysfunctional, loving but dysfunctional. My dad was an alcoholic my entire upbringing. My dad's been sober for 33 years, I think now, and he's my best friend. I'm very proud of him for that fact. My dad just had a birthday yesterday or 2 days ago. But so I come from a loving, lower middle class, New England, highly dysfunctional family.
Yeah. And does that relate to you becoming an entrepreneur? Like, are there things that you picked up from that childhood or things that you went through that you think make you a better entrepreneur today?
Great question. No one's asked me that. Yes. One, I learned work ethic from my dad. Even though he was drinking, my dad somehow found a way to get to work every morning, to work late at night. But one of the gifts of when you're the child of an alcoholic, everything happens for you and not to you in life if you make it so. And one of the things that I learned to do at a very young age was assess and read people, particularly my dad, because I needed to know. I was the oldest of three younger sisters and my mom. And I kind of needed to know when dad came home, which dad was it? Was it loving, playful dad who was sober, or was it sort of maybe tired, angry, upset, disconnected, drunk dad, right? And so I learned to read him, like I'm talking like 5, 6 years old. I would read him and assess his body language and his length, his tonality and his walk and his face. And that really serves me as an entrepreneur because I can connect with people because I can read them pretty well. And I'm comfortable in my own skin enough to be able to be present with other people. And so ironically, there's a lot of lessons that came from there. Also empathy. I'm empathetic, I think maybe a little bit more because I know what it's like to be chronically worried, have anxiety and stress. And also, probably the ability to deal with stress. I'm more comfortable in stress because I was raised in it, and so when stress hits, it's a familiar place for me. When anxiety and worry and fear hits, it's a familiar place. And there's nothing wrong with having fear. Fear's like right now, there's a lot of things to be afraid of with the virus, what's going to happen to businesses. It's to the extent that you're afraid. Is it an appropriate amount of fear, or are you magnifying it to where you can't function? And one of the things when you're a kid and you deal with fear and anxiety is I've learned not to magnify it, compared to what? Compared to a 5-year-old who doesn't know if his dad's going to come home? Compared to a 5-year-old who's not sure if his dad's be angry when he gets there. So my fear is appropriate to the situation I find myself in, I think, as an entrepreneur.
Got it. And were your parents entrepreneurs? Did they like sales? Were they kind of into that, or were they the complete opposite?
You know the answer, but I like that you're asking it. No, complete opposite. Mine's a working family. No entrepreneurs in my family on either side that I'm aware of. And salespeople were like the plague in my house. You know, anybody selling was a bad person. They had ill-gotten intentions. And even maybe a little bit, I come from one of those families, not in a bad way, but maybe we look at people who are successful a little bit askantly, you know, like how'd they get that? Why is that so important to them? Very liberal family. And so maybe some of the liberal parts of it that are looking down at success, and I don't mean that all liberal people are that way. You know what I mean? There's so many beautiful things about being socially liberal, but one of them was almost like, who are these people that are so successful, and who do they have to hurt to get there? You know, and so that was sort of ingrained in. So when I started to pursue success, and it was in selling and in persuasion, a lot of eye rolling in my family. You know, a lot of, I see what you're doing. You know, you're not like us anymore. There's a little of that, like, who are you trying to be? I thought you had good values. Well, you know, I did teach my family that pursuing success and helping people and getting wealthy doesn't mean that you've abandoned doing good things. In fact, you're rewarded to the extent that you do good things as an entrepreneur. But certainly there's a lot to overcome in my house and in my own thinking. To this day, I feel, you know, there's an element, Zain, I think that people at least give me some credit for, which is some humility relative to maybe some of the financial success I've had. And I think some of that is born out of almost embarrassment about it because of the way that I was raised. And to this day, my parents don't care about how much money I make. I have a jet my parents have never flown on. Never. They've seen it once because I begged them because it was parked down the street from where they live. They came and looked at it for 5 minutes and said, that's great. And didn't ask me a question about it. Don't care that I have it. If you met my parents, they would never tell you that their son is wealthy.
It's crazy. It's so crazy because I have the same exact thing. Like I have to, like every time I talk to my mom, it's the same exact thing. Like, oh, why do you pay so much for this? Or why do you pay so much for that? Or like, I have this coupon, like I have this thing. It's like that mentality never goes away. And I'm always like, Mom, Dad, no, it's all right. You know, this is yours. And I'm still at the point where
my mom came to this beach house that I'm at the first time, and it wasn't, wow, you live on the ocean, it's magnificent. My mother literally, and bless her heart, walked in the front door. She goes, what's the electric bill in this place? You know, and I'm like, Mom, you don't buy this house and be worried about the electric bill. I'll be okay. You know, well, be careful. Don't try to impress everybody. It's, you know, we love you anyway. I'm like, Mom, it's sort of disappointing, isn't it? Because one of the reasons you succeed is you want to make your family proud of you.
Yeah.
You know, you want them to be proud of you. You want to impress them. And I think inside they deeply are like, you know, I'm sure with your family, there's a part of them that go, wow, look who our son's becoming. You know, and so they're probably more proud than they lead on in ways that you don't realize.
Yeah, and I think a part of it is just a fear, right? It's like they never really made it. Everyone around them told them that, you know, it was bad to become successful, or if you're rich, you're greedy, and kind of all of these things. And that's something that, you know, kept getting pushed on me. And I think a part of it was, I'm really lucky that it got pushed on me because I was one of those kids that every time my parents told me to do something, I'd do the opposite. So they always told me, like, study, focus on school, like, don't go into sales or business or anything like that. You got to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. And I did the complete opposite, and it led me to this path. So it's really funny you say that, man.
That's why you've been so tremendously successful at such a young age. And you've done it so young. That's what's remarkable about you.
I appreciate that, man. I appreciate it. So everyone talks about the good times, but the bad times, I know that you've been through a tremendous amount of lows in your life. So kind of talk about those and like, what did you use to get out of those times? Because one thing I find with a lot of young entrepreneurs is they go through some low times and they give up really easily. So, you know, for you, what were some of those tough times and how did you get out of them?
I almost gave up many times. I'd love to tell you that I had these big visions and I never thought of quitting. I thought about quitting every day the first 3 or 4 years for sure. Every day I thought about quitting because all these tapes of my childhood's playing in my head. Who am I to think I could do this? People like me don't succeed, you know, and it doesn't matter anyway. Mom's right. Just be a good person. And probably the most downtime for me, there's a lot, but I went through a pretty bad run after I was kind of successful. So it's funny. I had really bad times and then I kind of did okay. When I was young, I bought a house and then I bought a second house and I had a couple cars and I had a little bit of money saved and then I hit a real downslide. Sometimes that's even harder after a little bit of success too. And maybe people can relate to this. And then I remember one morning, I just got married. My wife went out to the parking lot. We were really struggling and our power had been turned off. And she goes, "You're not going to believe this. My car was stolen." And I remember going, "God, can you throw more on me?" Right. And so I called the police report, and the cops come out. There was broken glass. And I'm like, "Man, my car was stolen," only to find out that evening that it wasn't stolen. It was repossessed.
Wow.
And so then that was gone. Then we were down to one car. And then about a week after that, the worst thing you could have happen in terms of utilities, our water got turned off. And we went 45 days with no water. You can't brush your teeth, you can't bathe, you can't cook with no water. And every morning we would have to get up. I'm this new kind of husband selling this big old entrepreneurial dream. I'd already achieved some stuff, and I'd lost a house, lost a car, lost the power. Now we're living in an apartment, lost the water, and we'd have to walk down. And there was a pool there at our apartment complex, an outdoor shower. And I'd hold a towel up. My wife would take a shower in the freezing cold. Then she'd hold the towel up. We'd brush our teeth in there. Just really shameful. And then we gather our stuff up and walk back up to our apartment every morning. And so many entrepreneurs can relate to this. I was selling this dream and living a nightmare. And that incongruency made me feel like a fraud, like I was lying, like I'm faking everything. But the truth is, what I was doing was I was building my testimony. That test was my testimony. I was building my story. So now that I've had some success, my success isn't what's inspiring. What's inspiring is what I had to go through to become successful. If this was all easy, who the hell's inspired by that? But the fact that I went through all that helps me help other people. And so for those of you that are going through that right now, if you'll persevere, if your dreams are bigger than this moment, like really, truly who you're going to become long term, and play the long game. Life is long. Life is long. And if you give yourself enough time, you know why you'll win? Almost everybody else will quit. That's a fact, man. Like people go, "Wow, you're a really good communicator now." That's because I've had thousands of reps. I wasn't the best communicator back in the day. I'd see guys tell me, like, "How's he put those words together? They're so smart. I don't know what half these words mean. I can't think that quickly. How do they?" And over time, they all quit. And I became the best communicator because I was the last one left. And now I'm pretty good because I do it all the time.
And like, how did you stay inspired during that? Because I would imagine that those are super tough times. You have a lot of depressing, negative thoughts during those times because you're like preaching a dream to other people, but you yourself, you feel like a fraud. So how did you stay inspired during those times? And I would imagine that, in the relationship, there's probably some problems too, because wherever there's financial problems, it definitely stems back to your family and your relationship. So how was that?
I've watched some of your interviews, by the way, bro. You're a great interviewer. We were just talking about Lewis Howes before this. What a great interview. You have that same gift. You know what got me through? Honestly, role models, people I looked up to who had stories of failure. And I kind of hold on to, it's funny. Many of my first dreams were like, I'd like to live on the ocean. I'd like to live on a golf course. I didn't even golf. Like I kind of borrowed someone else's dream because I didn't grow up with lots of dreams. I kind of copied other people's dreams. I'm like, that looks cool. I'll try that as a dream. And so I had role models and heroes that I looked up to, and I wanted to be more like them, and their lives looked pretty cool. And so it's funny because I didn't have a family. We never talk about dreams or what do you want to become or what do you want to do? I had no idea. So I sort of saw other people's lives. I thought, well, maybe that's what I want. And then I would go out when I had some success, I'd go touch my dreams. Like I remember coming down here to the beach, and I wasn't making a lot of money, but about every 8 weeks, I'd set these contests up with myself. And if I hit my sales goals and my savings goals, I'd give myself one night at the Ritz-Carlton Dana Point, and my wife would go in and get a massage. I'd go play golf. We'd have one nice dinner with one decent bottle of wine, but I'd touch the dream for a day. And then maybe 8 weeks later, we do it again somewhere. 8 weeks later, all of a sudden, when you touch your dream enough, you dabble in your dream, you start to go, I belong here. I'm not visiting. I belong here. The more you kind of touch a dream over and over again, and your mind gravitates towards what it's most familiar with. And so the more I became familiar with my dream, the more I moved towards it by touching it intermittently and sporadically. So that was a big key for me too.
Got it, man. Got it. So like surrounding yourself in a bigger, better environment constantly over and over and over again, and kind of like tricking yourself into getting into that environment. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd watch. It sounds silly, but I'd pull up to the valet, or actually I wouldn't. I'd pull up to the parking lot and we'd walk our bags in, but I would watch guys get out of their car at the valet. I remember, because I'd never been to a valet when I was a kid. And I remember watching, how's the guy hand him does he give him a tip now or when he comes back? How's the guy walk into the, like I would, you pick up things through proximity. Or at the dinner table, things like, how does a guy sit at the chair? I'm serious. How do they order? Like, I would observe these things through proximity. And then when I play these rounds of golf, how these people thought and talked and what their ideas were and what problems they were solving. And just by being around them, I became more like them. Now you have guys like you or myself with podcasts and social media. You can kind of be in proximity to these people every single day. And it's changed the world, man. That's why there's so many successful entrepreneurs now, is proximity to, years ago, a guy like you, your success would be a secret at such a young age. Now you can go, hey, these are my keys. I'm just like you. And here's some of the people like you and I. Most people don't know this. You and I talk a couple times a week now through text, or we communicate together. So now you're in proximity to me. And I was in proximity back in those days to Tony Robbins or Sylvester Stallone, or a lot of who my mentors were, but Phil Knights that are still in my life. And I've kind of just passed it down. And now someone like you passed it down, and the next person who learns will do the same thing.
Yeah, and you always talk about faith and service. I always hear that in you, and I absolutely love that because I think it's the best way to lead. So how does someone actually build their faith? Because when you grow up in a negative environment where there's poverty, or it's, even if it's middle class or lower middle class, it's hard to have faith because people always tell you that your dreams aren't possible. So how do you keep that faith, and what kind of keeps you rooted? Because even today, every time I talk to you, you're going just as hard. I'll never see you on another call acting a little different or having a little less energy. You're always going just as hard. It seems like you've kept that faith consistently. You haven't gotten, complacent. So how do you keep that faith?
Yeah, well, great question. One of the places my faith comes from is my actual faith, which is in God for me. And I don't preach a particular faith to anybody. That's not my role in life, but I'd really make a huge mistake if I didn't say that my faith and God's made a difference for me. And people say, well, I struggle with my faith. You're supposed to. I have a relationship with God. And what that means for me is sometimes it's a great relationship, and sometimes we're in strife. Sometimes I doubt. Sometimes I'm upset. Right now there's a coronavirus. I'm like, God, what are you doing? Come on, man, let's go, right? And so people think, well, I don't have a strong faith because I have doubts. No, it's a relationship. And those doubts cause you to question it, and it strengthens it over time as you answer those questions. So that's one type of faith. And that's the root of my success is I'm only average and ordinary, but God's great, right? Mm-hmm. The other piece of it is I have an abundant faith in what you call the universe, or I'm one of these guys, I'm a Christian, but I believe in the quantum field. I believe in energy. I believe you can plug into something that's infinitely more powerful than you are. And so I believe there's a law of reciprocity in life. I believe that if I take the right actions long enough and consistently enough, my 50 years on earth have proven to me that there is a harvest when you plant seeds. I don't always know when the harvest is going to come, but I know it comes. That faith is the most critical part, Zain. I'm so glad you asked it, is that most people expect an immediate result. And there's an echo in life. I did a whole podcast on this, that when you do the right things, it sort of echoes into the universe and it eventually comes back, but we don't know when, right? When you do negative things, you stop reading, you stop making your phone calls, you start making contacts, that echo comes back in about 60 to 90 days. If things are crappy for you right now, you can look back 60 to 90 days ago, I slacked off, I was getting up later, I wasn't making my phone calls. If it's your body, you weren't eating quite as clean, you weren't doing the cardio, 60 to 90 days, the negatives hit. The positives is an unknown return echo. It can be 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. I've had great things happen from an action I took 5 years ago, but I believe it comes back. And so that's why I don't quit. I'm waiting around for my victory. I'm waiting around for the reward. Most people don't believe that echo is true. So they'll take all the right actions. There's no result. They're like, screw it, I'm out. This isn't for me. Or worse, I hate this. Oh, it's a sign from God. I don't belong doing this. Right? That's the biggest cop-out in the world, right? You were born to do something great in your life. Every one of us was, in big ways and small ways, in different areas of our life. You were born for greatness. You were put here to be average. When you were born, the doctor didn't take you, slap you on the ass, and tell your mom, hey, here's an average one, right? No such thing. All of us have greatness in it. It's a matter of whether or not we'll find the things we're great at and stay at them long enough until we prove it.
Yep.
And for me, I just stayed long enough through huge prices. The truth is, my will to win has no price tag. With most people with enough failure, enough setbacks, they'll relent. They'll sell out their dream. They'll sell out their family. I can't do it anymore. The price is too big. Not me, man. As long as it's legal, ethical, and moral, I'll pay any price, which is why right now, today, 17 Zoom calls, just did a TV show in Las Vegas. I am after it harder than I've ever been. I'm more excited than I've ever been because I now know more than ever at my age that the stuff I'm doing now, there's an echo coming back. That's exciting to me, right? That's exciting that I know there's a return on my investment as long as I stick around long enough to collect on it, right? That's an exciting thing to know at my age in every area.
And one thing that I see in you in every call you have, again, every speaking engagement you have, every video podcast, you have a massive amount of enthusiasm. And you always talk about that as a leader. You have to have a massive amount of enthusiasm. So touch on that. Like one thing that always, frustrates me is when I meet a business owner who isn't passionate about what they do, or they're talking about 5 different vehicles and, they're just like not really focused and they're not very excited. But every time I talk to you, you preach this enthusiasm and you have this enthusiasm that makes you more excited. It makes me excited. It makes everyone around you excited. So how do you build that enthusiasm up? Is that like something you've always had as a leader?
Wow, dude, I love your questions. You just hit on something so critical as a leader. You need to sell a big enough dream and vision as a leader, but the dreams and visions of everybody that's in your stewardship can fit inside the one you're selling. However, here's a biggie that I never get a chance to talk about. I think most entrepreneurs underestimate the amount of energy you must transmit to other people to get them to consistently take action. I'm conscious of it. And by the way, you can't transfer to me something that which you're not experiencing yourself. So this is real. Once or twice you can do it. It has to be real. Like you have to so be on fire with enthusiasm for what you're doing that you can't help but give that gift to somebody else. But I think a lot of entrepreneurs underestimate the amount of energy required to win long term. And I just don't anymore. I was watching Dwayne Johnson's live last night, and we're working on getting him on my show right now. But I'm watching this guy's energy and enthusiasm. Like, that's a brother, man. Like, he just gets it, right? Because as an entrepreneur, your job is to carry the emotional load of your company. Just hear that again. The entire emotional load of your company is on your shoulders. You're carrying the energy. You're carrying the emotional load for everybody all the time. You're going to be up to that task physically, spiritually, emotionally, hydrating it up, working out enough that you can keep pouring energy into people. And here's what's funny. What's most interesting, I was evaluating kind of my dearest friends. All of them are major energy givers in their own way. Some of them, it's not like talking faster or louder like I am. But when I'm around them, they vibrate at such a high frequency. They give me energy. And I got to the point in my life where I just don't keep these people around that don't bring energy to the game, man. And some of them bring it different. Some of them are very quiet, but their strength, their belief level vibrates at such a high frequency. It gives me energy and strength. I was just on a call with my business partner, Andy Frisella. He does it differently, but like, man, there's an energy there that I'm attracted to, right? And long term, as an entrepreneur, almost everything's going to be connected to your ability to execute your plan, no question, execution, but the energy with which you do it and the speed. Entrepreneurship's now more than ever about speed. Right now, Corona, and I know it's a long answer, how quickly can you execute and pivot? Can you innovate? You know, this is a company you and I are a part of, our financial company, where we're pivoting, we're innovating, we're creating all the time at such fast speeds, sometimes too fast for our own ability to execute, but at such fast speeds that nobody can compete with us because we're bringing such energy and speed to the table.
And what's more important to you, enthusiasm, do you think, as an entrepreneur, or structure and talent and, kind of IQ? Like, what do you think as an entrepreneur is more important?
They're both super critical, but I will take desire, heart, energy, enthusiasm, because I can give you structure. I can create systems around you. But if you don't have energy and enthusiasm and drive and ambition, you can have all the structures in the world in your toast. And I'm proof of that. You're proof of that, man. Like, you're learning a whole new industry with me right now. I'm in other businesses that I don't know a lot about. I can learn the structures and the mechanics and the execution because I have such massive desire level. I was listening to I have a podcast coming out tomorrow with A-Rod. And we were talking about, in his case, I said, you may be the greatest baseball player I've ever seen. He may be the greatest shortstop and third baseman of all time. Only guy who could play two positions. You could argue whatever you believe about A-Rod. And he goes, I've got almost 700 home runs, and I'll probably mess up the stat here. But he said, do you know that I'm 5th all time in strikeouts? Wow. Most people don't understand that. I'm 5th all time, man. In the history of the sport, I've struck out the 5th amount of times of anybody. And he said it was my ability to deal with the strikeouts that ultimately allowed me to hit all these home runs and drive in all these runs. He's got 3,000 hits, almost 700 home runs. And I know what people say, well, there was this issue with performance. Hey, dude, you hit that many home runs, you can play, right?
For sure.
And it was his ability to deal with the strikeouts and the criticism in his life that allowed him to get to that level. And that's no different than any entrepreneur. So I'll take the desire, although I'd like both.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And how important is preparation for you? Because it seems like, you're going call to call, you're doing all these podcasts, but are you constantly preparing? And like, how important is preparation? Is it something that you kind of just snap and it turns on, or are you always prepared? Okay, got
so it. Your audience may not see the visual, but I'm holding up my notes for this call. I've got my notes for the next call. I am a preparation freakazoid. And the reason is it's where my confidence comes from. If I feel totally prepared, actually A-Rod talked about this in the podcast too that I had with him. When I feel totally prepared, I'm a force. When I don't feel prepared, it's like kryptonite for my self-confidence. My confidence doesn't come from this amazing ability or confidence I have in my own skills, right? I have some pretty good skills, but when I'm totally prepared, all of you know exactly what I'm talking about. When I'm totally prepared, I have a tremendous amount of self-confidence. And by the way, my life is preparation for the moments I'm not prepared, ironically. Meaning I'm prepared for things I'm not prepared for. I've got enough experience in executing in all these different areas of my life that when something arises that I'm not prepared for, I'm ironically prepared for it because of how crazy I am about it. Just like you can tell by the questions you're asking how well we know each other. There's not a minute of this you haven't seen in your mind play itself out, right? So the benchmark for me, the separation is in the preparation. I can tell you that the athletes that I know, like Tom Brady, who's a member of one of my clubs, I literally believe, and by the way, Peyton Manning, who's a good friend of mine too, I brought him into the Arte Syndicate. I can tell you both of their separators was not physical talent, it was preparation. Wow. Phil Mickelson, who's won the Masters multiple times, and Fred Couples, who plays well there, are both members of my club. And one day I was watching, Phil Mickelson was on the driving range, just to give you an example, he had a series of hats he had thrown out on the range. One was like 20 yards away, 40 yards. One was like 52 yards away, right? Check this out. It was the week before the Masters. And, normally on a golf course, the pins are at like 100 yards, 150 yards at a driving range. And I'm like, why do you have one at 52 yards, right? And he goes, because I looked at last year's data, and on 3 holes, I'm going to have a 52-yard shot into the green if I hit my drive where I'm supposed to. So why would I practice a 75-yard wedge when I know they're going to be 52 yards? You know what? Most of the dudes practicing for that Masters are just hitting the same old shots everybody else is. He dialed his preparation down to 45 yards, 52 yards, and he was hitting hundreds of 52-yard wedges. Well, how much more ready was he when he got on the golf course for that 52-yard shot than everybody else in the field that week? That's the separation in the preparation. The specificity with which you prepare yourself is the separator.
And have you always been like this, or have you had mentors and have those mentors helped you? And one thing I always see with young people happens over and over again is they don't think that they need a mentor. They think that they can kind of just get through life without one. So how important has mentorship been in your life?
It's everything, bro. I'm an average, ordinary person. I didn't do any of this crap. None of it, right? Like I sound like I have this collective smarts. What it is collective wisdom from all kinds of people that I've been around. I wish people could go back and meet me in high school or even in college or even my first few years in business, because it would give you so much hope. These social media people you see like myself or even you or podcasts you listen to, they're wonderful. But the downside is you see the after. So, these weight loss commercials, the power of them is you see the guy when he was fat and then they put the skinny picture, the ripped picture next to it. The power is the fat version. Is you see the contrast, right? And the problem of seeing me now or you now is like, yeah, of course. I wish you could see the before. The before is I didn't know any of this. I didn't even know what goals were really to write down, never mind gratitude exercises or what the reticular activating system is. And you know what I'm a product of, bro, and so are you, that is underestimated? I'm a product of just momentum. Momentum is a great thing to take advantage of in life. When you start stacking wins, they can make an average human superhuman. Momentum is something that magnifies all your talents and gifts and make you look a whole lot better maybe than you really are. You look at sports, it's not always the best NFL team that wins the Super Bowl. Wild card teams win. Sometimes it's the hottest defense, right? Or the hottest quarterback. In the NHL and hockey, sometimes it's the hottest goaltender, not the best team. In baseball, whose bats are hot, whose bullpen's on fire, often wins championships because they've got momentum. Same in business, same in every area of life. Is I just got a little momentum, and when I lose it, I know how to regenerate it.
And how do you set those goals? You were just talking about goals. How do you set goals for yourself? Like at every point, obviously they change. I talk about, for different people, it's different. Like when you first start, you have survival as your goal, right? And then you move on to material, and then you move on to like financial freedom and time freedom. And then, there's this one big bucket of purpose and legacy. And I truly believe that like you're there right now. It's what keeps you lit up every single day. So how do you set goals, and do your goals change as you achieve more success, or have they always been the same?
They've changed tremendously. And initially they were survival goals, right? Like I need a certain amount of money saved so I just feel a little bit of peace, right? And so many of those were my goals. I'm a real, I separate from outcome a little bit sometimes, meaning I'm more focused on stuff I can actually control. So I'll have weird goals like a certain amount of contacts a day, or a certain amount of reps at the gym, or a certain amount of calories in my diet, not always just my body fat, but the things that, for example, my body that I can control. Mm-hmm. At this stage of my life, I know what my button is. I know my dominant need is contribution, and the other one is growth. And so for me, they're almost always predicated upon the contribution I can make. And I don't mean that in a foofy way. Believe me, I have selfish things I want to achieve. I want to be wealthier. But if you really want to get me going, like to do your show today, 20 years ago, you could have said, "Hey, come on my show. I've got a big audience. People are going to love you." And that would have been my goal, because significance was my main driver, which is a wonderful driver. Significance, recognition, competition. This is an awesome driver, right? Well, I've had a lot of that. And so now, how did you get me on? You said, "Hey, man, you can help some people. Let's help some people." Because my button is contribution. So that's an important thing, too, in sales and in leading people, is don't always magnify your need onto somebody. Maybe your need is significance and recognition, but maybe mine's not. And so evaluate the person, assess them. Like I talked about, I learned from being around my dad when I was young. What would drive an Ed Mylett right now is not significance. It's just not. Although I love being significant, and I'd probably be miserable if I had none. But because I am blessed to have some, that's not my big need. My big need right now is contribution and growth. And so you get me to do things, and I get myself to do things when I link growth and contribution to doing it. Most importantly, with your goals is link to it what you believe your need is. If making $10 million is a goal for years, that's great. But why? Why is that the need? Because I want to be financially independent. I want to be a force. I want people to know me. There's nothing wrong with that. Just link your need to it. You're much more likely your why to it to get it than you are just having a vanilla goal.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I have one more question for you before I let you go here. If everything were erased, right? And obviously that this isn't logical. It's not going to happen. But let's say everything were erased. People didn't know who Ed Mylett was. All the jets got taken away, the car, the house, the money. Like, what would you want to be known as, other than all of the accomplishments that you've had? Like, what should people remember about Ed Mylett, and what is the one thing you're striving for people to get, out of everything you've created? Because I'm sure it's not like, oh, I have this jet, or I have this house, or I made this much money. I'm sure it's much bigger than that. So what do you want to be remembered for?
And I'm not there yet. I would like to be known as a good man, and like a really good man. I mean, actually, I get somewhat emotional about that. I've always wanted to be a good man. I used to think being a good man meant I could prove it, like financially, or amount of money I've got, or amount of things I have. And by the way, that is evidence of being good at something. But for me, I would like to just be known as a good man. And I don't measure up to that every day. I'm going through this really interesting time in my life where I'm evaluating that about myself. I could be a better man. I could be happier. I could spread more happiness to people. I look at a young man like you, and I'm grateful for our friendship. Like, I really am. And I'd like to think that someday if I weren't here, you go, I knew Ed for a long time. And the first thing that occurred to you was he was a good man. More than he was a rich man, or he was powerful, or what a good talker. All that stuff would be great, but I'd love to think the first thing that occurred to you is he's a good man and one of my best friends. I could trust him. I could rely on him. He really cared about me. He believed in me. He cared about me. And I'm growing to have that with you. I bet you notice this, but if you notice how many times I'm on your Instagram lives when you're doing calls, do you get to see that ever? Do you ever notice?
No, I haven't.
Well, a lot of them, bro. Sometimes they're 11 o'clock at night when you're doing them. So now I know.
Yeah.
And why am I doing that? I'm watching you. I care about you. I want to see how you're talking, how I could help you, how you're interacting with people, because you are on this list of people now that are part of who I care about. And so I'd love, it's a long answer, but I want people to understand the depth of it. The depth of it is, like, that's all we really have when we're gone. Did you live a good life? There's my favorite scene in every movie ever, in any movie ever, is the end of Saving Private Ryan. If you haven't seen it, you need to see it. But they do this amazing thing where Tom Hanks dies, who's sort of the mentor of Matt Damon in the movie. And they morph Matt Damon from this young man on the battlefield to this older version of him at the National Cemetery. And he's got his whole family next to him, his wife and children, and he's looking at Tom Hanks now, what do you call the tombstone? Mm-hmm. And he's reflecting on this time, and his wife walks over to him. I get emotional every time I see this. You go to YouTube and see it. And he looks to his wife, and he's old now, and he says, "Tell me I'm a good man. Tell me I've lived a good life." And she looks back at him and says, "Of course." And he gets very emotional about it. And I think that's always hit me, even when I was a young man, because ultimately that's what I want. Tell me I'm a good man. Tell me I've lived a good life. And I've made the most of all the blessings God's given me, all the people that have entered my life, all the opportunities that have presented to me, that I made the most of them. So that would certainly be my answer. I know it was a long answer, but.
No, I love that. And I just want to say, with all of your accomplishments, everything you've achieved, all of the materials, that's not the thing that excites me about you, because there's a lot of people that have done that. And when I first met you, I was telling my girlfriend this, when I first met you, the first thing that I got was your energy. And seeing your energy and how real you were and how relatable you were, your communication, your contact just made me feel like, wow, this is a very important person who has a significant amount of gratitude and empathy. And being able to see that makes me push myself, because now I wake up every day and I'm like, how is my energy level? Am I grateful enough? Am I bringing my all? Am I reaching my full potential? And those are the things that I've gotten in the time that I've known you, and it's been remarkable. So I really do appreciate it, brother.
I just want to say something about you. For your age and what you've accomplished, you have an unbelievable amount of poise and presence. And there's a quiet confidence and articulation that you have that's so far beyond your years. And I must say, it reminds me a little bit. I think you have more of it than I had. But it reminds me a little bit when I was your age. You're almost like an old soul with a young man's energy. And there's something about your strength and poise that's very strong. And it's something I really admire you. It's not something you see in what I consider to be still a very young man who's had so much success. You also have a great deal of humility. And the other thing you have, because I've met a lot of people who know you, people who know you trust and like you. Mm-hmm. And that's remarkable for someone your age who have already garnered that with so many people in your life. And so that's why I kind of pour into you. It's like, imagine this dude in 10 years. Imagine, and that makes me excited to imagine where you will be 10 years from now. It's going to be crazy.
I appreciate that, man. And I appreciate it. And hopefully we get to do it together. I can't wait to look back a decade from now and talk about this, man. Well, Ed, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And where can everyone find and follow you? I'm sure everyone already is following you, but for those of the people tuning in who don't, where can everyone find you?
Probably go to Instagram. It's probably the most prominent social media. It's Ed Mylett, EDMYLETT. You can go to YouTube or iTunes, get my podcast too. So sure.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for all the things. And just in this call, like I said, every single time I talk to you, I learn something great. And I just want to appreciate you for being a good man and really, really just kind of giving back and helping people.
Been my honor, brother. Enjoyed it so much. Flew by. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it, brother.